This Week in Radio Tech, episode 168, is brought to you by Andrew and Jared, the broadcast audio fanatics. They're visiting radio stations and SBE chapters all over the country. See what they're up to at broadcastaudiofanatics.com.
And now, our feature presentation.
Twert. Who's got the right formula for streaming radio stations? And what do listeners want for interaction? Well, maybe StreamOn has the answer.
All right, calm down. He says that to everyone.
This calls for immediate discussion.
What's up, Doc?
All your days are belong to us.
From his palatial office of important business,
or in a choice hotel in a distant land,
this is Kirk Harnack.
Chris Tarr and Chris Tobin join me, along with our guest, Andrew Snook, with StreamOn for a fresh look at audio streaming.
You're dialed in to This Week in Radio Tech.
Hey, it's time for This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Kirk Harnack, your host, and I am so glad you've joined us. We're going to have a lot of fun today on this show. We always try to have fun, but I've got a great guest to talk to and tell us about streaming audio in a kind of an interesting new way. So we'll tell you about that in just a minute. Our show, This Week in Radio Tech, number 168 is this episode, is brought to you by the folks at the Broadcast Audio Fanatics. These guys are friends of us at the Telos Alliance, Andrew and Jared. And if you want to follow them, just go to broadcastaudiofanatics.com. and check out Andrew and Jared as they make their way across the United States and visit broadcasters all over the country with a whole truckload of gear. Some of it works. All of it's supposed to. Hey, joining me on the show, our co-hosts, our usual co-hosts. First of all, let's bring in live from Dover, New Jersey. That's different. The best-dressed engineer in radio. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Chris Tobin. Hey, Chris.
Hello, Kirk. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm at Dover, New Jersey. The home of WMTR and WDHA radio, greater media stations, and also for this evening only, the SBE 15 New York City chapter barbecue that we do every year, and that's sponsored by the folks over at BGS. So it's been a good time. We've had great stuff, a lot of folks having fun, and it's a thunderstorm rolling through town, by the way. There's the rain, downpour, lightning, and 4 radio towers outside the building, so it's a perfect place to be.
Cool. So the SB chapter had a barbecue. Is that just a social event at the transmitter site?
Social event and at the transmitter site every year. This year it's at a co-located studio and transmitter site with the greater media folks. So yeah, every year we do it, and every year it rains and there's a thunderstorm. So it's tradition. You come out to a transmitter site with lightning and 4 large towers and have a barbecue. Why not?
We do that in Nashville, or at least we have in a few years past. I'm not sure we did last year, but we would have a summer barbecue, usually around the end of the summer instead of the beginning of the summer. And sometimes we would do it at a transmitter site. And it was kind of interesting because, what do engineers do when they walk into the transmitter site of a competing radio station? What do they look at?
Audio processing.
Yeah, and so maybe the modulation monitor, or at least the indicator on the exciter, if that's sort of accurate.
True, but here in the New York Metro, we all know what everybody's doing, so we professionally look the other way.
Ah, okay. Well, maybe we're not so professional in Nashville, because I can tell you, we all looked. No wonder he's so loud. Oh, that's interesting. Well, hey, Chris Tobin can be found daily at musichamusa.com. Is that right?
Yes. C. Tobin at musichamusa.com.
All right.
Audio and video codecs over IP.
Yes, and IP certainly seems to be the common thing. Hey, Chris Tarr is in Mukwonago, Wisconsin, in an undisclosed bedroom. Hello, Chris Tarr.
Hello there, Kirk. I am Director of Engineering and Operations for 88.9 Radio Milwaukee, staff writer for Radio Guide Magazine, co-founder of the Virtual Engineer at BroadcastEngineering.info, and now Village of Mukwonago Board of Zoning member.
That's great. You should follow Chris Tarr on Facebook. How would they do that? Is it like Facebook/Chris Tarr or something?
Yeah, I think it's Facebook Geek Jedi, I believe. Or you can search for my name. It's in there too. Yeah. You can also follow me on Twitter at The Geek Jedi.
Chris Tarr posts, you're in the middle of a project, a couple of projects actually, but it's your full-time station. You're ripping a building apart and rebuilding it or something like this.
Yeah, pretty much. I posted pictures of a big hole the other day.
I know, I saw that. What's that about? Is that where the console's going? You buying a console that big?
It's a huge. No, that's where the elevator will be.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's a big, huge honking project. It actually It's actually not as big as it appears because there was very little there to demo, so the demo's already done, and we're getting ready to put up walls. So actually, it'll only be another, May, June, July, another maybe 45 days, 60 days.
Cool. Okay. Hey, I want to mention again, you skipped by it real fast. Your website where you conduct forums for Broadcast Engineer. It's what? Broadcastengineering.info?
Broadcastengineering.info.
Ah, okay. All right. I'm signed up there. I haven't been there in a few weeks. I need to go back and stir some pudding or something.
There you go.
Hey, all right. Our guest today is a fellow that I met about 2 years ago. He's a Canadian guy from Canada, and it's Andrew Snook with a company called StreamOn. Hello, Andrew. Welcome in.
Hi, Kirk.
So you're the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer at StreamOn. Well, first of all, I've met you guys. I forget if you contacted me or I contacted you, but you guys were running some ads, maybe in Broadcast Dialogue, or maybe I saw one in a U.S. magazine for a little appliance that you guys make that does internet streaming. Tell me about your basic what your company does in this business plan.
Okay, well, I guess maybe just to give you a bit of a background is we're a streaming audio company that started out as a radio company. We used to own and operate 10 radio stations here in Western Canada, and we built up this little streaming product initially for our own stations. But after we sold those off in 2006, we said, we've got something kind of unique here. Maybe we should, see if this is something that other radio stations could use as well. And that product that you mentioned is this little box that we call a streaming appliance, and it's solid state machine that we can ship out to any radio station in the world, and you just plug in power, internet, and audio, and you're up and streaming. It's very, very simple and very stable.
Obviously, this product, in a way, competes with a product that's made by the company that I work for. We make a product called the ProStream. It does Omni audio processing and streaming. And then and now your product does Omni audio processing and streaming. That's kind of cool.
Yes, yeah. Well, we're excited to have the Omni processing inside. I know that's a big feature that a lot of radio engineers have asked us about, that processing and that signature sound, and it's nice to have that on board.
Now, a lot of people who provide streaming services, whether it's hardware or software or a CDN providing a content distribution network, this is it's kind of a big jumbled mess at the moment, I think. Mess is not the right word, but it's a big wild world out there. There are big companies like Triton Digital that have purchased other intellectual property, and they're putting big systems together. But you guys have an interesting and different approach to what the consumer, what your listeners get to experience. And that's what I want to talk about. But maybe you could start out by kind of leading us up to how you got to where you are. When you guys first started streaming, weren't you just doing standard run-of-the-mill, hey, send us your radio station feed and we'll feed it to the world? Is that how you got started?
A little bit different. With our own stations, we had some unique needs. We had, this is back in around 2000 that we started streaming our own stations, and we had some stations that were rock format, others that were country. The one that I was heavily involved in here in Edmonton, Alberta, we had, I believe it was 22 different languages on this one station, and we had a large listenership out in the country in areas where they just had dial-up modems. So we had some of these unique needs, and we thought we wanted to just create I guess something that could scale out across multiple stations and was very, very simple for the listener. Just a one-click listening experience, works on dial-up modems, and that's kind of how that came about. Okay,
so works on dial-up modems. Obviously, you must have been doing some pretty low bit rate encoding, but I thought I heard you say something about not all of this was real time. Maybe you'd buffer up quite a bit, or even store some programming in the client software. What was your idea there about trying to stream to people who are on dial-up modems?
At the time, our solution was actually to use Ogg Vorbis. That was the initial codec we got started with. This was in the days where people were using MP3 and Real Audio, Windows Media Player, and we found that with Vorbis we could get decent, not great sound quality at 32 kilobits per second. So it was listenable on a dial-up modem, and we implemented our own player in using a Java applet that was able to play back that stream, and we found that was a pretty good solution for having a one-click listening experience with decent sound quality at the time. And yes, there definitely were buffers involved to be able to handle some of those network ins and outs.
Okay, but buffering not anything like what you guys are doing now. That we're going to get to later on. I don't want to spoil that surprise, because you guys have this really cool solution right now that puts a listener, gives him or her some authority about what he's listening to. Can tailor his own experience, which is very neat. But I want to get to so in a way you did something cool and different. You used Ogg Vorbis because you could use it at a lower bit rate, and you felt it was better quality, and maybe you didn't have royalties to pay out, things like that. What kind of listener in Canada, though, was looking to listen via dial-up? I mean, you got a lot of flat country out there, especially you're in Edmonton, Alberta, right?
Yep.
So you've got. I've never been there. Maybe I'm wrong. You got a lot of flat country. FM signals go way to the horizon and beyond. AM signals go a long, long ways. What were people really needing to do dial-up and streaming for?
Well, with our programming here in Edmonton on CKER, we had those 22 different languages. Some of them were in communities well outside of the city. There's a big Ukrainian population that's a few hundred miles outside of Edmonton, and the FM signal didn't quite reach that area, but those people wanted to tune in online. And after we got started, we also found that there was listenership all around the world. Our Dutch programming, we had people tuning in from Holland at all kinds of different times to catch that content and see what was going on in Western Canada.
Wow, okay. I wouldn't have thought. How about that? Well, I have a couple little stations in American Samoa, and there are more Samoans on the west coast of the U.S. than there are in American Samoa. So it's it's kind of popular, especially when they're playing a football game in Pongo Pongo. The Samoans in Hawaii and on the West Coast want to take a listen to that. So I guess there are niche audiences all around the world, huh?
Yes, definitely.
Wow. Hey, I don't mean to boy, as usual, here I am hogging the conversation. Chris, man, if you got something to contribute or ask, just hop right in here. You're watching This Week in Radio Tech or listening to This Week in Radio Tech. It's our 168th episode. I'm Kirk Harnack along with Chris Tobin and Chris Tarr, and our special guest is Andrew Snook. Andrew's with a company called StreamOn. If you want to check out their website, now don't everybody go there all there at once and break the website. It's streamon.fm. If you go to streamon.com, you won't get it. Go to streamon.fm and check out what they're doing for mobile listening, their streaming appliance, and the really cool thing that's called Listen Later. So, Andrew, kind of take us through the process here. What began your thinking to get to the technology that you guys are offering now? What was the thought process that you might want to give people a customizable experience?
Yeah, well, I guess the Listen Later product you mentioned in that customized experience, we've been trying to solve a problem for a number of years now, where we've noticed that there's YouTube videos that go viral. People are passing those around. There's funny emails, things like that. And we asked ourselves the question, why doesn't this happen with radio content? And we always kind of felt like it's not because of a lack of quality content. Radio's got great content, but the problem often is that you've got these podcasts that stations put together, and there's a big delay from the time when something airs to when it hits online. You've got to go back into your logger, cut out the pieces that are interesting, remove copyrighted material, and that delay we feel is a big part of the reason why you don't get that virality in the audio world that you do in the video. So we wanted to create a product that would give radio broadcasters a chance to take a moment that just aired, post it on Facebook and Twitter right away, and then the personality can pick up the mic and say, that moment that just happened, it's already up on Facebook, already up on Twitter. You can listen to it again. You can pass it around to friends and family members, and we've definitely got some advertising included in that as well, so that you can actually finally monetize social media.
So, okay, I'm trying to piece this together in my head here. So, as you said, when let me back up. People at a radio station creating content, oftentimes a crazy, hilarious morning show, or even serious information. That broadcasters tend to consistently create the best content. Yeah, there are plenty of podcasters or other people at home doing interesting things too. I mean, I think we're doing something interesting here, and we're not on a terrestrial transmitter. But consistently, day in, day out, broadcasters that have, real live people behind the mics doing interesting things, these guys are creating interesting and compelling programming. But it's so very ephemeral. It goes in, it goes out, it's done. And maybe you'll have a little best of. Maybe the producer will chop up some audio from somebody winning a prize and run that as a promo the rest of the day. But now you're saying that there are clips of audio that are worth saving, worth reliving. People want to hear themselves again, or hear that joke again, hear whatever clip it may be again. And in the world of radio broadcasting, there's not necessarily a very good way to get that done. As there is, with video, you hear about something on the news, and lo and behold, a few hours later, somebody's captured it and put it up on YouTube. So radio heretofore hasn't had that mechanism unless somebody worked really hard to do it. And is that what you guys have invented, a way to get that done and let the listeners easily recapture and relive that moment?
Yes. Our Listen Later experience, I guess, right within the player, we give listeners the ability to go back. They can see a timeline of what's aired and replay some of that content and share it with other listeners right after it happens.
All right. So I'm looking at your website here, and there is this section called Listen Later. Now there's an interface. There's a whole YouTube video, I guess, on this thing. The interface that I'm looking at here, though, is this for the station to use or for the listener to use?
Yeah, so that interface there that you see is for the station to use. A station can take content, push it out to Facebook and Twitter. We've also got a new player that you can see under the smooth spot section of our site that puts some of those controls into the listener's hands so that they can also push that content out.
Okay. All right. So really your idea of a streaming solution that's good for broadcasters consists of a tool at the radio station where you've got some technology that really is critical to make this happen. And that is automatically determining the difference between content and commercials. That is, programming content and commercials. You've got to know that, don't you?
Yeah, we solve that as in a multi-stage approach. The first is we by integrating with the radio automation systems, we get some information about what the content is, and then we've got a special algorithm that scans the audio waveform to look and find out at what point those transitions actually happen, when a song starts or stops and a commercial begins or ends. Okay,
so you get obviously contact closures or messages from the automation system. Maybe you take hints from can you take a hint from a disc jockey's microphone being turned on and off?
That's something we're integrating right now with the Axia solution to be able to capture those GPIO signals.
Okay. And then you've got, addition to that, you've got some audio algorithm to determine when did the programming end and when did the spot begin, huh?
Exactly. Yeah, so we found that you need a mixture of several different approaches to capture some of that timing accurately.
So can you give me a hint on what do you do when analyzing audio to figure out when the spot started? Obviously, if you've got a nice, quiet guy talking on the air, and then along comes, hey, come and see us at Cummins Kia. We got the best deals for you. You'd think there'd be an algorithm that could figure that out. What can you give me a hint as to what you do to determine that transition?
Well, we do a few things. The simplest is silence detection. We get that signal from automation that there's been a change in audio, and we can scan the area around it. And if there's some clear drops in audio, even just for a few milliseconds, that's the easy situation to pick up. We can also see those big level spikes if you're going into a lot of commercial breaks. They hit really hard at the beginning, so we look for that. And I think we've got 22 different characteristics that we're looking for in those audio waveforms now to find where a transition point actually is.
Wow. Okay, man, and the whole idea there is it to get this identification of when there's a transition in programming, to get that down to the correct couple of milliseconds, so you can do an effective cutaway, and so you can save the right stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly right. So you can save the right stuff, and we've found that the goal has always been 30 milliseconds. That's the point where the human ear, it's a little bit harder to perceive that there's what's happened in the audio.
Okay, well, 30 milliseconds. Gee, that's all right. Let me do the math here. That's 3/100ths of a second, right?
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah, because 300 milliseconds would be a third of a second, or 3/10 of a second. So 30 milliseconds is 31 thousandths, or 3/100ths of a second. Wow. Okay. Well, that ought to be pretty effective. And the end goal there, I guess, you don't want your listeners to have to put up with an upcut or a chop off in the audio. If they're arranging what they want to hear, or they want to hear a cut over again, if they're choosing a block of audio to hear again on their little app, they want it to work right. Is that why you're doing all this work?
That's part of it. The other part is for just ad insertion, to be able to cover an ad that airs on FM with something that's unique for the internet. And as most people in the broadcasting world are well too familiar with, you have some of these bad transitions where an ad break begins, and you hear the first half second is something that would air on FM, and then it cuts in with something different for the internet. And as broadcasters, we've always been troubled by that problem, and
and I think
felt this algorithm was a solution to that.
Okay, all right. I'm going to come back and ask you about how you might handle audio processing and the actual insertion of a different ad that wasn't part of the original content stream. Hey, Chris and Chris, this is where I want to hear from you. Both of you have experience streaming. Both of you have experience with ad insertion. I actually have very little hands-on experience with this. I guess I know how this works. The company I work for, we make the processing and the encoding, but the actual sticking of an ad in and then returning back to program material, that I don't have so much hands-on with. Chris Tobin, I'll ask you first. What has been your experience in trying to get things to match up so that they're not such horrible shifts in level or tonality for the final listener? Because man, I've heard some just horrible stuff listening to streaming radio stations that just made me believe the station did not care one whit about my listening experience. I have to sit there and run the volume control up and down while they're in a spot break to listen to some streaming station. Chris Tobin?
Well, you're absolutely right on some levels. Well, let me see. My experience, in the early days, we had an automation system. We had two automation systems. One was we'll call the terrestrial on-air, and then we had the second one, which was what fed the stream. And what we did was the primary automation system had built-in flags in the software so that we could trigger the downstream automation for the internet. So commercials and the insertion was seamless. If when the presenter went to break, he simply pressed the EVQ, the event queue button once. It triggered the automation locally on the transmitter, the over-the-air, at the same time, and set a trigger to the automation driving the commercial play out onto the stream. So the streaming system switch away from the program of the studio, switch to the local automation. It plays it. When the commercial break ended, it triggered the switcher back, and it was seamless. The experience was exactly what you expected. However, fast forward 2 years later, and other companies outside of the broadcast industry introduce technologies that can allow you to insert commercials in various forms and shapes off-site through various means, but the problem was they were not trafficked in the same manner that we are accustomed to, which was a schedule. All they did was a flat list. So you pulled commercials from a list and they just played it in the time allotted, saying the following break that started is 3 minutes. They would just grab whatever commercials were in a file or listings, threw them in. Then those commercials also came from outside the radio station on many levels, say ad agencies. So local production studio ops did not have control. So we go back to my first model. In-house production studio folks took care of all spots, both internet and local radio. So therefore levels would match properly. There's a standard to follow. Move forward to today's abilities, and you've taken the equation from quality control from the local radio station out, and now it's a third party. And that's what you're running into. So when you're listening to some of the streams, a lot of folks are relying on a third-party ad insertion, and as a result, the quality control is lost because now those commercials are being added into the server somewhere off-site, probably not by all the production folks at the station, but some outside ad agency delivery systems that are now available, and it's just become a mess. So as you pointed out, Kirk, the user experience is not what you expect. Yes, you're riding levels, or you're shocked by the level changes, and you're like, what the heck's going on? Or maybe you're hearing a commercial getting cut off, another one starting because of the way the buffering took place at that third-party ad insertion. So it's a difficult way to do things because money drives the bus. And if you're told by some third party you can add extra 3 minutes of commercials because of the way we buffer and we do this, then the person on the internet doesn't really know the difference because they're not listening to the radio and the internet, so they won't know that things are out of sync. And I know that from personal experience, and trust me, it can be a mess. It's not good.
The technology's changed a little bit even since then, because you're right, for a long time, there was content from different places and processed differently, and really, the break was started by a trigger from the automation system, and then the overlay kicked in. But as of recently, there have been some leaps, especially in thanks to computers getting beefier, and for example, at Intercom we switched to a system where all of our streamers now use Omnia AXE software, and we actually have 2 sound cards, and all of the audio is funneled in through a mixer. We have our the audio that's located on the server, the replacement overlay audio. We have the audio that's from the third party that gets dropped in, and then we've got our studio audio, our raw studio audio. All of that audio is funneled out and then back in and processed through an AXE and then sent out to the stream. So it actually has its own processing chain, and each essentially it's just a virtual mixer that takes all of our the audio and mixes it all together. The other thing we do now is we delay the audio so that when these triggers happen, the breaks don't have to be exactly the same time. Timing doesn't matter anymore. They essentially can buffer the real-time audio and ratchet it back a minute or two so that if the break is short or long or whatever, it doesn't really matter. The audio will fit in no matter what, and the transitions will almost always be seamless, and the audio will also be pretty well leveled out. Now again, that's a fairly recent development. Up until not too long ago. What Chris was talking about was very common. It still is for stations that haven't upgraded their hardware.
Yeah, it's still out there. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the part of the issue was, not only that, not a lot of stations delayed their audio either. So you had real time, and if for some reason your local break wasn't the exact same length as your filler material, you'd have things that were starting and ending early, and all these other things. But a lot of those, problems have been resolved. It's just a matter of having the computing power to do it.
Chris Tarr, would you say that in the system Intercom's using, they're delaying the program audio by enough to make up for variations in spot breaks? So the spot break may be scheduled to be 3 minutes, but it turns out to be they're almost always over. 3 minutes and 4 seconds, and this happens enough during the day. You're saying that it's delayed enough to make up for that overall?
Absolutely, yeah, because generally you only have a variance of a few seconds, and when you're delayed 35, 40 seconds, that it works out just fine, and it's a dynamic delay as well. So if things run fast, you lose some of the delay. If things run slow, you gain some delay. But there's always some form of delay in there at some point, so that at the end of the day, it all evens out. The only thing we had to deal with that we didn't really think about originally is program delays, is profanity delays. And it turns out now with the software you can actually build it in where you can say, okay, at morning drive, because what happens is we're feeding the delayed audio to the streamer. So the trigger for the breaks happens 8 seconds before the audio actually goes into the commercial. So before we solve this problem, you'd hit a break and the last 8 seconds of whatever was on the air got clipped off and replaced with replacement audio. So now you can actually even build in delays on the triggers and say, okay, when you get the trigger for the break from the GPIO, wait 8 seconds before you play the filler material, and also remember that you're 8 seconds, at the other end as well. So, those are all things at first that, weren't solved very, I don't want to say they weren't solved. They were, but not very gracefully. But it's gotten to the point now where it's actually pretty good. And as much as we all hate to actually replace advertising, it is what it is. Now, speaking of that, I don't want to get too far off track, but I don't know if any of you saw the news this week about Saga, and they've decided to limit their streaming only to local areas, and they're working with their vendor to restrict IP addresses, because now this is what they're saying, is that the experience with overlays and everything is ridiculous and they don't want to have to do it. And so therefore, they're just going to limit streaming only to their local markets. So you can only listen to their stream if you're in that area. I don't know if you guys have heard anything about that.
I did read something about that, and I didn't realize the implications, or I thought they were just saying that, well, ad insertion is too sloppy, so we're not going to do that. So I guess we're going to limit it to our local area. Does that imply that if your streaming really is limited to about the same area as your broadcast signal, that you're okay with AFTRA or other concerns? I thought it was the medium, not the coverage area.
I don't know. And they're talking about that. They're also talking about paying the royalty fees. Really the bottom line is I think it's about money, and it really isn't about all this other stuff. I was talking with our digital guy at Radio Milwaukee, who's fantastic, by the way. We had that discussion of the people who listen that aren't in that market are probably your listeners that are somewhere else right now. So to sit there and limit the IP addresses to your local area is kind of short-sighted, because let's be honest, and this is not a knock on Saga, this is radio in general, you're not going to have people in California listening to your country station in Michigan, when they've got 800 country stations in California on the radio. So, you got to be honest here. You don't have nationwide listeners. That percentage is pretty small. The people who are listening from out of town are probably your listeners from your area who are somewhere else that now can't hear your radio station back home. So, I think there's a lot more to it than just a poor user experience. I think that there's, I think there's some sort of, financial thing going on, and there's more to that story.
That'll be interesting to find out.
I would agree with you, Chris.
Yeah, Andrew Snook, can you add anything to that? Now, your laws in Canada may be different, but have stations talked about, or do they have any advantage in streaming only to a certain geographical area, like their own coverage area?
In Canada, it's a little bit different. We haven't had the legal requirements to force ad replacement upon the stations like the situation in the U.S. But my assessment of the American situation is the problem is really an inventory issue, that you've got all these stations that all decided at the same time that they were going to replace the ads that they have on FM with other content for the internet, and there just simply isn't enough inventory to fill all of that digital advertising. So you have a lot of PSAs being repeated over and over again. You've got stations that go to an ad break, and it might be a rock station that queues up some jazz music to play for 2 minutes, so the kind of way we assess that is we think it's an inventory problem, and perhaps a different strategy. Instead of saying an all or nothing, we're going to replace the whole ad break, there's room for some selective replacement where you can take maybe the first 1 or 2 spots in a break and replace them with something unique for online, and after that return to a simulcast.
Okay, and I could be wrong, but my impression was always that, no, we're not going to stream any ad that came from an agency because the talent may be an AFTRA member, and then we have to pay some kind of money for playing that ad over the internet because there's a different agreement for AFTRA talent over the internet. So we're just going to replace all the ads, and you're right about the inventory. Then what do we replace them with? Well, how about the same 3 PSAs over and over again, or the same promo for the morning show over and over again? And by the way, we're going to make sure it's at a different level than everything else we play.
And that, and that's something that, like the Sagas and even larger companies really haven't. And I think there's a reason why they really haven't pursued this. For example, I know we've talked about Mike and Carrie Messick up in Door County a couple times at their radio station. They don't do ad insertion because they don't run any agency ads. All of their ads are local. So there's no reason to do ad insertion. But I've got to imagine at this day and age that the ad agencies and the radio stations and everybody else can work out something with after and go, hey, listen, let's stop this foolishness. But I think what's happened is, it's become more about a second income stream, over the internet versus local. I think that, what initially was the problem to be solved really could have been solved another way. And I think it was just one of those, fine, if you're, fine, we just won't play national ads and nah. And, we don't need you. And it's, come, all this way. So, I do think that there was a problem initially. And, instead of resolving that, we said, okay, fine, we don't need you. We're going to overlay ads and look at that. We can make our own money that way. And that's where it went, and nobody ever looked back. And up until recently, that technology's been pretty poor. And again, it's gotten better as time has gone on. But, I think that, there's a whole lot of things that are going on right now. I think in the Saga case that we're talking about, I think part of it is paying for royalties. I think part of it is just, sticking it to the man kind of thing. So you get all of that. But you're right, inventory is a big issue. And I know some stations can do fill songs. I mean, that's a great thing about doing delays. You can actually schedule a song in that break. And you can replace it with a song, because it doesn't matter how long the song is because there's a delay and it's dynamic. So it will seamlessly go from the break into a song and then back to live programming.
No, but I'll tell you, if you don't have that technology of that quite variable delay that you were talking about the intercom was doing, then you get to hear a lot of Beatles songs because they're all so short.
Exactly.
You don't hear "Stairway to Heaven" as a replacement song, very often. Hey guys, we are in the middle of This Week in Radio Tech. Our show is number 100 and what is it? What did we say? 168?
168.
Yeah, sorry, I keep forgetting that. Thanks. We're talking with our guest, Andrew Snook, from a company called StreamOn at streamon.fm in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. They are a provider of streaming appliances and services, and they have a really interesting solution that we're going to get into fully here right after our break. Also with me are Chris Tarr from Mukwonago, Wisconsin, and broadcastengineering.info, and also Chris Tobin, and he is on location in Dover, New Jersey at what was an SBE meeting earlier today. And visiting that SBE meeting, I understand, were a couple of guys, Andrew and Jared. They are broadcast audio fanatics. Now, let's see, straight up, I guess that what you have to know is they are on the payroll of the folks at the Telos Alliance. And what are we paying them to do? We're paying them to drive this van. And it's a big van. And they're driving it all over the U.S., visiting radio stations and SBE meetings. And hey, Andrew Zarian, if you want to toss up that webpage there's a webpage you may want to see. It's called broadcastaudiofanatics.com. And here at this website, Andrew and Jared chronicle their travels. And I don't know how long. Usually, I guess they get something posted the next day or two. But they've been to just a few places up in the Northeast, mostly Pennsylvania so far. They've been to Greencastle, PA, at Verstandig Broadcasting. They were at Radio 1 in D.C., actually. Let's see, where else have they been? Fredericksburg, Virginia, WFLS and WBQB. So, hey, these guys got to come through Nashville a couple of months ago, and we got to spend some time together, Jared and Andrew and I. In fact, they were right here at my office, at my house. And we hooked up some Telos gear, got a few things tuned up on their way to go pick up the linear acoustic gear. So if you're in television audio, they've got linear acoustic gear on board. If you're interested in program delay, like a profanity delay or very precise delay for HD radio timing and matching up and synchronizing, they've got that from the folks at 25/7. They've also got that machine that what's the best way to say it? It makes Rush Limbaugh talk faster so you can put more spots in his show. All right? Yeah, they got one of those on board. They have a couple of consoles from Axia. They have Chris Tobin, you were there today. What did Andrew and Jared show you in the Broadcast Audio Fanatics van?
Oh, well, we see. We had the console, the Element. We had an Element console, the Radius console. We got to see the VX phone system. We actually made a call within the van, call to itself. So we had a local loopback on the system to demonstrate the console use in a hybrid. It was very nice. There's an Omnia 11, I believe, in the van as well. You can't miss that orange faceplate. What else? We have the 25. Was it? What do you call it? The delay units were in there, and there was a couple of other items I saw. Oh, the new X nodes. The X nodes. The half rack boxes for the
That's
Axia
right.
network. Yep. And then they also had the soft touch panel for the Element console. So if you have a touch screen on your laptop or a touch screen on a monitor, you can actually control your Element console from afar. So you don't get that 3 o'clock phone call from the jock saying, I can't hear anything in queue, or for some reason there's no audio on the console and I can't get it to work. You can remote in, get a picture of the console itself, and actually slide the audio gain up and the fader, even though the fader may be down, you can bring the audio up. And then on the console itself in the studio, a little arrow appears facing down saying, take that fader and then bring it up until you see a number appear, and that's where you leave it. So you don't have to drive for 30 minutes or an hour to your studio just to press a button because the DJ was asleep at the wheel, basically. It was a pretty cool feature.
That's the
best way to describe it. I mean, of course, it never happens. It's been a long time. Those days are far gone. Well, no, maybe about just 2 days ago.
Hey, Chris Tarr, I need to find out when they're going to be in your neck of the woods so they can come by and teach you a couple things about Axia consoles.
You know, there's probably still a few things I don't know, although after installing 11 of them, or 8 of them rather, I know quite a bit.
Actually, I was going to ask you to maybe teach Andrew and Jared a thing or two. That'd be really handy.
I got to be honest, you mentioned those X nodes. I love those new X nodes. Those are fantastic.
That's a great feature. Those are great.
Aren't those great? Yeah, I have, I think, 11 or 12 of them installed already, and they're just they're great. And so I don't want to go into another ad for Axia stuff, but when you mentioned that, it got me thinking about that. I mentioned that the other day compared to the original nodes. Those X nodes are just really slick.
They are. Hey, well, go to the website, folks, after this show, broadcastaudiofanatics.com. You can follow them on their Tumblr blog. And at the moment, I'm not seeing that the tour itself is posted. I thought I heard that the next few days they'll have this their tour schedule posted. They're kind of doing a shakedown right now amongst friendlies.
Well, I can tell you this. I can tell you for the tour, they're on their way upstate New York for the start of the tour. So Syracuse, Binghamton area, up northern part of New York, and then heading west from there.
Well, good deal. Well, thanks. You're more up to date than I am. BroadcastAudioFanatics.com. If you can't get to NAB and you want to see some cool gear from Telos, from Omnia, from Axia, 25/7, and Linear Acoustic, find out where these guys are going to be. You can email them too, right on the website, BroadcastAudioFanatics.com. Email personally to Jared or Andrew. And hey, these are a couple of young budding engineers. They're great guys. They've committed to be on the road for year and a half, 2 years, some crazy amount of time, and they'll need a shave by the time they're done. So check them out if you would at broadcastaudiofanatics.com. All right, this is This Week in Radio Tech, and our guest is Andrew Snook. Hey, Andrew, let's just focus right in now. Let's railroad right into the subject at hand. I want to know everything about this technology, Smooth Spot and Listen Later. You've already foreshadowed some of this, but I want to know all about Listen Later. What does the radio station do with their interface? So they're streaming, they got your appliance, all this audio is going somewhere, but they still get to control how the user experiences or what they can hear again. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so within the Listen Later interface, the radio station has a colorized timeline where they can see all of the content that's played right up to the second. And we designed this to be super, super easy to use so that even somebody in the studio on air, they can see what just aired, and they just drag an event down to create a playlist, click create, and that gets pushed off to Facebook and Twitter. So it's super easy, and the purpose of it is to use that live content that just aired, get that out right away, and give your listeners a chance to maybe catch an interview that just came in partway through, to listen to something again that was valuable to them, and to pass that on to friends and family members who also might want to listen.
You mentioned this earlier, and I'm sorry, I let it slip by. I was thinking just of what the station does with their app and what the listeners do with the station provided app that really it's from StreamOn. But you just mentioned the Facebook and the Twitter integration, and that's where most people are all the time. I mean, I'm on Facebook all the time. I look at my Twitter feed 20 times a day. So how can the station, if I subscribe to their feed, what am I seeing in those feeds that might be interesting to me?
So what you'll see is a link back to the station branded player. This is really important. This isn't just a raw piece of audio that we're posting out there and keeping people on Facebook and Twitter. We're encouraging stations. You click the post to Facebook, and it posts a link back to the branded player with your advertising. And a listener they'll see that. It'll have a nice title, a nice description. They'll click play, and it will open the branded player with the clip they were interested in, followed by some advertising, and then kick them into the live stream.
Okay. So, all right. And maybe you just answered this, but I was just thinking about it. So if a listener wants to, hear, oh gosh, somebody did win that $10,000 this morning, I want to hear that, and it's posted on Facebook. They'll click on that, they'll hear that link again, and then they're brought back into the live stream.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're encouraging stations to use this as a tool to bring in people who would never ever listen to your station, but a friend or family member said, Mom, I just won this contest on air. You've got to hear this. And you never know, Mom might have a PPM meter that she's happens to have on that picks up that signal.
Tell me about, actually somebody in the chat room asked this, and I'll ask you, Bob Holowenko asked, tell me about metadata. How does that get from various devices, mostly the automation system, but maybe not only, at the radio station, and then how does that end up appearing in what the listener sees via Facebook, Twitter, the app, wherever it might be?
That's a complicated question because there's a lot of different automation systems out there, and our experience has been that many of them have that data poorly typed in at the automation system level. You might have a song that's spelled phonetically. It's maybe got some spelling mistakes. It was never ever intended to air to show up online, but often, most automation systems will let you export that to some type of feed that can be embedded into a stream. In our case, we use ID3 tags, so it's embedded right in with the audio. But you could make that a separate channel as well.
Now, do you find most automation systems allow you to use ID3 tags, or is it just really all over the board?
Well, the automation system itself will export an XML file or comma separated or something like that, and our streaming appliance will read that in, parse it, and throw it in ID3 tags with.
Oh, that's where it goes. Okay.
Yeah.
Understood. Okay. Well, that was one question. Let's see. What else did I want to? Chris, anything come to mind here that you need to ask about?
Yeah, I have
tech?
something.
Yeah.
With the listen later, I know it's designed so that you can't download the file because of copyright purposes. But what if I am a station format, not music, but a talk format, and I have certain shows or maybe news elements that I'd like the audience to be able to grab it in the morning on their way out the door and listen to it on a player while they're on the subway or on a bus commuting or doing something. Material in that show piece. Nothing copyrighted, no commercials that are copyrighted or anything like that. Is there an option to do that?
To make that a download if the audience wants?
Right. Make it a download if there's no copyrighted material of concern, if that's the primary reason why they can't download it.
Yeah, so we do give, the station has a tool within the Listen Later interface to say, download this as a file. that's not available to the end listener. But if a station wants to download that, maybe put it in an iTunes podcast, absolutely, that is an option.
Excellent. Okay, so Listen Later, if properly thought out, could actually be used to create a long tail, so to speak, user experience. Now I create an exchange of experiences between both the radio station and the audience, and I control it, rather than having to rely on some outside party and hope that everything falls into place.
Yeah, exactly.
Ah, very nice. Okay, I like that.
It sounds like too that takes a lot of the work out of producing something for example, an iTunes download or something like that.
Absolutely.
That, really, it's all kind of already pieced together, and you can download it and just simply move it over to iTunes.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, a question for you regarding the same product, the Listen Later. I know it's Listen, I know it's audio, it's radio. What about if the radio station has a multimedia-rich appearance, and they're starting to do video within the studio and doing things that now, if they could take a snapshot of the video and the audio of the event that took place? Is that something on the roadmap down the road?
No, it's not. We get asked about video from time to time, and our answer is always that we're radio people. We do audio, and that's where we want to specialize. So maybe some point in the distant future, but for right now, we're a radio company.
Oh, that's fine. That's fine. I just curious because
yeah,
it's interesting how things are moving. I call it a multimedia-rich environment, so it's just a matter of time, I guess.
Andrew, your company is a Canadian company. Are you looking for clients outside of Canada?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're based in Canada, but probably half of our stations are in Canada, the other half in the States and elsewhere. So we provide streaming services and podcasting to stations really all around the world.
Now, as part of your service, it seems as though there's a fair amount of caching or some hosting going on. Is that a service that you guys provide, or is it some third parties storage that's going on there?
Yeah, so we provide a full end-to-end solution, starting with the encoding to the stream delivery, the player, and upgrades, and we also respond to listener questions. If there's somebody that can't figure out how to get the stream to work on their computer, we'll answer all of those tickets as well.
I see on your website you have a really pretty picture of a data center here. I want to hear about that. But actually, understanding streaming statistics, that seems pretty important for a station that's actually trying to figure out, are we doing the right thing? Are we hitting the right audience? Are we promoting the right thing? Do we need to figure out another vehicle to let folks in a certain area or of a certain age group, certain demographic, know about the streaming apps and our social integration, our social presence? What statistics are important, and what can StreamOn provide to radio stations to understand who's listening?
I think the important thing to know is when your audience is listening, how long, and most importantly, who that audience is. And we've partnered actually with an outside company. We felt it was important to have some third-party validated statistics. We use the AdsWiz Audiometrics platform, and you can go in and dial in and actually see the listeners that are tuned in at the exact minute on a map, where they're listening from, how long they've been listening, and you can also see some of those radio stats like AQH and QM right within that interface.
Wow. All right. Now back to the question on the data center. You've got some pictures here on your website that show different pictures of racks and lots of gear in there. What are we looking at there? Is that really a data center?
Yeah, we actually have some racks in a few different data centers, and everything's we've got a platform that's Unix based, and we can activate a server at a new data center at any time.
Huh. Okay. So do you operate a server for every radio station that lights up?
No, we scale the different stations across multiple servers.
Ah, gotcha. Okay. What about hey, fellow Canadian and a good friend of ours, Bob Holowenko. He asks the best questions, and he's been a guest on our show before. He's asking is StreamOn a distributed CDN? Do you have one or two or five data centers? How would you characterize your footprint for doing this?
We have data centers in Edmonton, Chicago, Phoenix, and we've also got a partnership with Limelight Networks. So we make use of some of their bandwidth in data centers all around the world.
Okay. Interesting. Chris, I'm about out of questions. I just want to get my hands on hardware and software to do this. And yeah, I know. I mean, I got some radio stations. We do a little bit of streaming, but it's just really basic stuff. And so you guys have done so much more of this. What additional questions have you got for Andrew?
Well, this is Chris. It sounds like to me the StreamOn product line and the products, what you're offering is you can do a complete turnkey end-to-end solution for a radio station who doesn't want to get caught up, as Chris Tarr mentioned earlier, all the necessary moving parts to do streaming, ad insertion, or whatever you want to do to create a better user experience or listener experience. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's exactly it. We're an end-to-end solution for broadcasters built with some radio thinking and all of those different components.
Okay, so if I was a radio station owner, I guess one of my questions would be, what level of service or service levels should I expect if I'm going to go with your servers and your setup and off-site? What can I expect? Do you, as we mentioned with the data centers, do you have built into your model, the redundancy to the point where you can ensure, like a 99 or 95% uptime, or the stuff that a radio station is going to get from the other CDN saying, well, the reason you should go with us is because we can do this, this, and this, and reroute around, blah, blah. Or do you offer such scalability or the ability to virtually keep things going because you found a different way? I'm just curious.
Well, our platform, because we've got some of those multiple data centers, we can fail over between different locations. And quite honestly, the server side is not usually a problem. Usually the biggest failure point with streaming is the internet connection at the radio station. You might have some times in the middle of the night where that's out for a bit, or there's some packet loss or jitter, and if that signal is out, then your stream is down. So for a station that's really concerned about redundancy, we always actually recommend purchase 2 streaming appliances and have a secondary internet connection with a cable or DSL provider that you can connect that to, just in case you've got one of those outages.
Okay, yeah, it's like the old days of T1s and diversity by separate carriers and physically having separate endpoints at your studio. So okay, perfect. That's a good solution.
Chris Tarr?
I got nothing. I got bases have been very well covered here.
Okay, well, good. Well, maybe I keep thinking that I'm. Look, I know I've expressed this many times on the show before, and I've just got to get my hands wet. I guess the whole area of metadata is still a little murky to me, and I'm going to have one of you guys just kind of walk me through this, either through my own Telos product, which has all kinds of ways to handle metadata, or even, hey, there's people I can ask, but I've just got to do it because I've just done the audio part, and I'm real comfortable with that. It's this richer streaming experience, and then Chris Tarr, when you were telling us in the audience about this variable delay that Intercom is doing, and to make up for spot sets of the wrong length, I can't tell you how much that makes my head spin. I mean, I get dizzy.
But that's the thing that's actually the easy part. Metadata, especially, is very easy. I think people get a little intimidated by the phrase metadata and like the delays, and I think that's hard to get your head around because radio has always been just kind of this linear, I press play, audio goes from start to end, and we're done. And it's not like that anymore. But metadata is just it's about as simple as you can get. That's information of whatever it is that you're doing, and that can be generated any number of ways and translated. And for example, and we're almost at the end of the show here, so I won't go too deep into this. But for example, in an automation system, when you play a song, your automation system spits out some form of metadata. be it, comma separated, XML, whatever, that just says, okay, here's what I'm playing. Here's the title and artist and song information and playtime and blah, 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 blah. Then at some point you have some sort of intermediary that takes that information and says, okay, I'm going to pull out what I need and then send it off to where it's supposed to go. So, usually there's some computer that takes that information, then spits it out in whatever form other devices need to see it in. And so you've got RDS and you've got PAD on HD and you've got title and artist on your stream. All of that is generated from metadata. It just creates new metadata and sends it off to the place it needs to go. So it's a whole lot easier than what it sounds. It's just that, you typically think of, there's some kind of magic that's going on there. It's really not. It's just essentially a string of text that has to be parsed in some way or another.
I just know the first time I do this, I'm going to have quotation marks and commas and pound signs just all over wherever it's supposed to be a nice clean feed. It's just going to look like they were marking out cuss words or something.
I'll tell you, a true story. I just recently, Mike and Carrie were talking about earlier, bought another station up in Sturgeon Bay. And so I went up to get their RDS set up with title and artist. And it took me, an hour or so to get the formatting right so that it wasn't just showing, random characters all over the place. But we eventually got it and, got it formatted so it looks good on the display and everything. And, once you get started with it, it's pretty easy. It's just, again, it takes a lot of just, very, critical thinking as you're going through the process to kind of know what's supposed to be there and what's not and that sort of thing. But it's a lot easier than it sounds.
Bob Holowenko reminds me that it's just like RDS. And you know what? My experience with RDS was actually 10 years ago and involved serial connections, and I hate serial and programming a pretty early model in Avonix, and it was extremely cryptic. You follow the directions, exactly step by step. And later on at my radio stations, my business partner, I didn't, but my business partner installed this great software from Arctic Palm called Center Stage Live, another Canadian company. And it does the formatting and ingesting and timing of RDS messages. So I guess there's a whole bunch of years I haven't had my hands on this stuff. So I'm itching to do it, and I just need to jump in and do it, right?
See, here's the thing, is that metadata hasn't changed. It's just that there are now programs that create that information. Like those RDS commands you're talking about haven't changed. It's still, I still get into the command line and start poking things in. But the difference is now you have these like Patapult and software like that, TRE, that does that for you. And essentially that's, that special software, really all that is it takes the data and creates those strings and sends them off to the RDS box. So it's just it really just automates the process that we used to use to send information. A dynamic message on an RDS is simply a piece of software continuing to type in those commands to the RDS box.
I'm making it harder than it has to be, I'm sure.
You are, yes.
Hey, Andrew Snook, thank you for being with us and helping to explain this. If people want to find out more, I've given the address StreamOn.fm. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, and you've got an instructional video there. You can link to it's right there on the site, or you can go to the YouTube page that has it. It's a listen later demo. That's pretty cool. I'm going to run through. It's just a 2.5-minute demo, so it runs through you really fast. What's going on there, Andrew? I hope to see you again, and you let me know when something else cool comes along. Oh, almost forgot, Andrew. I got to ask you one more thing. We mentioned earlier that you had incorporated Omnia audio processing into the StreamOn appliance. And I was a little part of the negotiations between our respective companies to get that done. Can you enlighten us about how that happened software-wise? I understand that we delivered to you some kind of Unix code or libraries or something that you guys are you're using our algorithms, but your own interface to those, something like that, right?
Yeah, so we worked with your programmers to get a version of the Omnia AXE that will run in a Unix-based environment to work on our streaming appliances, and it's been working phenomenally.
Huh. Okay, so do your StreamOn appliance users pick a preset? Can they make any more fine adjustments?
It's pick a preset. So you get the appliance and then you choose the preset that you want and lock it in there.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, very cool. I'm just amazed at how we can take some intellectual property that we own and negotiate for you to have it, and then you incorporate that and just make it work. I'm sure there's more than a few lines of code involved, but that's very neat. And I'm so glad that you have it in there. All right, guys, our program today has been brought to you by the Broadcast Audio Fanatics. This is Jared and Andrew, and they're traveling the U.S. in a van just chock full of broadcast gear. They do lock it up at night, so it's got an alarm on there, so don't be thinking anything. You want to check their website, broadcastaudiofanatics.com. They will be putting their tour dates up there to see where they're going to be in your part of the world. Right at the moment, they're headed to upstate New York. And then headed west from there. So check on them at broadcastaudiofanatics.com. Andrew Snook, thanks for being with us from StreamOn.fm.
Thanks, Kirk.
All right. Also with us, our usual co-host from Muckwannago, Wisconsin, the Geek Jedi Ninjaneer himself from broadcastengineering.info. It's Chris Tarr.
Thank you, Kirk.
All right. Thank you. And not in Manhattan, not in Queens, but in Dover, New Jersey, Chris Tobin. Thanks for being here, buddy.
I have to thank the folks at Grady Media for letting me be here in the conference room and having a great time, and also thank them for letting the SBE chapter do the barbecue despite the weather conditions. So hopefully next week I'll be coming from the GFQ studios, unless my schedule takes me somewhere else on the road. So we'll see what happens.
And coming up on future episodes, we are looking forward to having two luminaries in the world of AM transmission. Glenn Walden has agreed to come on our show. Glenn, I'm holding you to it. And Watt Hairston. These guys have maybe the same, maybe different ideas about what to do with the AM band. We're going to have them on the show, probably not the same show, because each of them talks a lot. We'll have them on separate shows and find out what their thoughts are about the AM band. Hey, thanks a lot to Andrew Zarian at the GFQ Network in Queens, New York, for switching and producing the show. Andrew, thank you very much. And we're going to see you guys next week on This Week in Radio Tech. Bye-bye, everybody.
That's all the bandwidth we can pill for this week. Another twort has propagated, and all the transmitters and audio equipment live happily ever after, thanks to the handsome engineer and his kind, benevolent care. We'll be back next week.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
This Week in Radio Tech. Subscribe to iTunes and you'll never miss a show. Search for This Week in Radio Tech in the iTunes Store. Soliciting is strictly encouraged. If you like today's show, tell a friend. If you didn't like it, we were never here. Kirk Harnack's wardrobe provided by the Salvation Army and the Red Cross Disaster Relief Services. Hair and makeup provided by Penelope Garcia Hernandez Weinberg.
He's unique, wouldn't you say?
I just want to get it over with.
This ends this transmission. Tango, Whiskey, India, Romeo, Tango. Signing off. Okay.